Alrighty.
All right. Let me know when you guys have eyes on.
Okay, I see your thing up on YouTube. Looks like we're good to go. Let me send you a little test message here.
All right.
Thing up on YouTube. Looks like we're good to go. Okay, test message sent. Test message here. Okay, test message sent.
Is that your computer, Les? It's
Oh, yeah, my bad. All correct now.
All right, if you're just joining our live stream, we're just going to give it a minute or two to let some folks funnel in here, and then we'll get started, which is pretty much the norm for every live stream I've ever watched. So.
Yeah.
Well, but you're an hour off of your mark. There must have been like, you know, a presidential speech or, you know, or the game ran late, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't get to mention this to you, Chris, but I've changed up my set here. What do you think? No more blue face, no more.
It does look better. I was actually thinking, look, we're symmetrical this time. It's not like, yeah.
All right, I got slizzard in the chat. Looks like we've got about 17 folks in here. Give it a little bit longer. Yes, I posted a notification on Instagram letting everybody know that we were going to be going live tonight. That's all I did. I didn't try to do anything on YouTube or anything, so it may hurt us.
A conversation is a conversation.
Right.
Yeah, and people will figure it out pretty fast. I mean, man, the views from these last couple have just been amazing with thousands of people watching us.
All right, we got about 30 folks in here, so I appreciate everybody joining in. And this is our live stream number 4. We started doing this when kind of the Afghanistan crumbling stuff started to take place, and thought it was a good opportunity to vent and talk things out. We since have kind of molded this to not only talk about Afghanistan, but also talk about other stuff going on in the world and right here in the United States. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. We're at just about 40 individuals watching right now. So we got kind of a smaller panel going on. I see everybody's like posting hi and hey, appreciate you all tuning in. Got a smaller panel tonight. We only got Les, who runs the YouTube channel Pegasus Tests. He's a Marine that served back in the early 90s. He served in Desert Storm, so he is a combat veteran of that war. We got Dr. Christopher Larsen over here on the right-hand side of the screen. He is a accomplished author. He's written many books on small unit leadership for the U.S. Army as well as the United States Marine Corps. He's also written books for Special Forces and things of that nature, which those books are available for you guys to check out. But he is also what we most know him as, Les and I, is the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, which was founded 40 years ago. And it's going to be celebrating its 40th anniversary coming up here at the end of this month for the fall semester there. So in any event, we're about to get started. We got a few topics tonight, 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, and then we'll just shoot from the hip from there. But the first one is we're going to just start talking about the current situation in Afghanistan, what's going on as far as we understand it. There's information funneling in, and then there's some stuff that's kind of up in the air and questionable. So we'll kick that can around and figure out what's going on there. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Larsen here to explain the second topic that we're going to talk about. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, you want me to go ahead and jump into that, huh?
Yeah, you can explain that one.
What do you want to? You were going to give the update with the Panjshir Valley first.
Well, yeah. I just want you to let everybody know what the second topic's going to be.
Okay, yeah. It's a big umbrella, right? It's a big umbrella, so no one has to get wet. But the question really here in the wake of the Biden defeat in Afghanistan, is are Western men willing to defend Western values? And of course, that right off the bat, you should be asking, well, what does he mean Western values? And so, But I think that's a conversation worth having, because certainly the three of us are not the only one. We've been reading up on it for the last several days. The blogosphere is alight with this discussion. Are Western men even willing to do this anymore?
All righty. So we'll talk. We'll kick those two topics around, and then we'll just shoot from the hip on anything else. Probably something more domestic going on. That's that people are focusing on. But just starting off the current situation in Afghanistan. So over the last few days, we're getting news that the Panjshir Valley has fallen, which was kind of like the last pocket of resistance in Afghanistan. And the thing about that is it's kind of been going back and forth for the last few days. The Taliban say, hey, we've conquered this. And then you have the resistance saying, no, we're still here. We're still fighting. And then that's kind of been going back and forth to the point to where even the Taliban was saying, yeah, we don't control it all yet. We only have like 5 of the 7 districts or whatever it was. But recently, as of, I believe, yesterday, their tune has changed, where the Taliban has actually officially came out and said, no, we have this. And I'm more inclined, even though it's the Taliban saying this, I'm more inclined to believe it now, because you even had Masood get on there and he's like saying, yep, we're ready to talk. We're ready to talk peace. And which before he wasn't really saying that. So the flip side of that is my understanding is the Taliban has cut off all like communications up there and electronics, signals and stuff. So they really can't get signal out and give up with their side that's going on, like their side of the story. All we're getting really is the Taliban side. But again, we're seeing pictures of Taliban, in the gates of that valley and at the governor's place and stuff like that and everything else. But I'll turn it over to one of you guys so you guys can bump your gums for a bit.
You want to take that one there, Les?
Okay. Well, the Taliban had momentum. They took Kabul. They took every district capital. They've gotten a fresh infusion of weapons and equipment. So the fact that they overran the Panjshir militarily is not the world's biggest surprise. You think about it, what became the new Northern Alliance was the remnants of the Afghan army, and it was an army that had no support, had no supply lines, had no material support, and all of a sudden their enemy got a big infusion of arms, ammunition, and equipment. So hearing that the valley fell, not the world's biggest surprise. Unfortunate, something I didn't want to hear, but it is what it is. That's the military situation on the ground. I think the bigger thing that's really occupying everybody's attention is the fact they say there's 6 aircraft full of Americans and Afghan allies and all that are being held hostage on the ground in Maz, waiting to get out. And some people are saying it's the Taliban, and some saying it's our own State Department preventing him from taking off. Anybody got any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I saw some video of Taliban showing pictures of helicopters, and I think one of the stories I saw was the helicopters that were on the ground belonged to that vice president. And then I also heard words that the Pakistanis are supporting the Taliban with drones, like actual drone strike capabilities and stuff like that. So it doesn't look good for that resistance over there, unfortunately.
Did you say Pakistan is supporting it?
I saw one news broadcast. Now it's out of India. India seems news coverage out of India seems to favor the resistance heavily. And obviously we know the Indians and Pakistanis aren't the best of friends. But they were stating that there was reports that Pakistani drones were conducting strikes on the resistance fighters up there. And we all know the Paks under the table were supporting the Taliban.
Well, that's where the Taliban come from. It's a Pakistan movement based out of the Swat Valley. So, and it does have alliances with certain members and certain sects of the Pakistan military. This has been known for a long time. I think Pakistan is hoping to leverage it against India, and India fears that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ISI, Pakistan's version of the CIA, basically created the Taliban. And, it's the Pakistan wants to control that area to their north, so it's in denial to their archenemy, India. It's just another step in the great game because Afghanistan itself was created as a buffer zone between the Russians and the British.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of people that want it to be just that. So the fact that it's a very lawless territory under no one's control, there are certain people in the world, that's an advantage to them.
Yeah.
Well, you can't say it's under no one's. We can no longer say that. Again, the Taliban are a foreign force. And yeah, I get it. I get it that they've recruited heavily, that they overwhelmingly the Taliban inside of Afghanistan. I don't mean to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. They are Afghan people. But the ideology, the formation, the funding, look, they've had sanctuary, Taliban that is, has had sanctuary across the Pakistani border in the Swat Valley for the past 20 years. And so there have been moments in time where the Pakistan military rather heroically stood up and fought against the Taliban and defeated them. But those gains were always temporary because the Taliban, like you said, the Pakistan and the Taliban military intelligence are joined at the hip. And so I think that's one thing. As to the Panjshir Valley, let me say a couple things there. And that is that, one, I will not be surprised at all. In fact, I strongly suspect what we're going to see is that the Northern Alliance continues to exist, at least for a while, as a resistance group, an armed resistance group. And they will seek sanctuary themselves, most likely in Tajikistan, potentially another nation as well, but most likely Tajikistan. And they'll seek sanctuary there where they can strike out against the Taliban, whatever. I don't mean to whatever, but I mean to whatever end, or to whatever means and to whatever end. I think it comes down to this. I remember a few years back, we were watching the first Democratic election in, in the Gaza Strip, right? In Gaza. And it was quite something. This is not that long ago, but it's a good, dozen years or more. And when they were asking the people, who are you voting for? You're voting for this person, you're voting for that person. This old man said something I think was just spot on. He said, look, this side is winning, and I wave their flag. And when the other side is winning, well, I wave their flag. And so I'm going to vote for whoever I think is going to win. And they're like, you mean whoever you want? And they're like, no. It doesn't matter what I want. No one cares what I want. Here's the thing. I want to be on the winning side, because if you're not on the winning side, you're on the losing side. Now, take that election and take that mindset, and let's go to Afghanistan. And I think this is what it comes down to. It may be that the Northern Alliance just read the tea leaves, predicted the future and said, are we going to be on the winning side and the losing side? Of course, I'm sure everybody said, well, we thought the Americans were here to stay. And now we can say, no. They'll say, no, we are in America's yesterday. They never cared about us. They were never our friend. And it's not just Afghanistan and the Northern Alliance who could say that. I wouldn't blame Australia for saying that. I wouldn't blame Canadians for saying, you bastards. We sent our sons to death for you because we believed in the cause you sold us. You convinced us. You sold us, you rotten bastards. And I'm going, yeah, well, can you blame any of the Afghan people for saying, look, this isn't good. This is dangerous. They're beheading people. I just want to be on the winning side so me and my family don't get beheaded.
Yeah. And you made a good point there about how our allies perceive us now. And let's contrast that with the previous president. Everybody got on him because he jumped down NATO's throat, called them out for not paying their fair share, talked about moving troops out of one NATO country into newer NATO members' countries. And everybody called him every name in the world. I remember one big commentator said, yes, the Europeans don't pay their own way, but that's part of the deal. Now it's funny, that president got those Europeans who didn't pay their own way to up the amount they were paying. They make investments in their armed forces and start being more active in their own defense. Now, what are they going to think with this president who abandoned an ally? You know, there's no spinning it. He abandoned an ally. Now, what are they going to believe about us?
Yeah. And I would just say, like, the world is taking note, right? And you know, democracy is our strength and our weakness, right? So it's like we vote our leaders, and you know, they might do the right decision. You know, we go in, we kick ass, make a bunch of promises, people back us, and then 4 years later or 8 years later, we get a new administration, complete 180, and it's those people that align with us that are, oh, sorry, dude, new policies.
Yeah. There was, I believe it was the president of Honduras said back in the early 80s that to be an enemy of the Americans is very dangerous. To be a friend is lethal.
That's so unfortunately true.
Yeah. And, you know, it's amazing how we've changed in that respect, because if you go back during the Cold War, it didn't matter the administration that was in power. We were in agreement that we were going to support NATO, CETO, CENTO, and all the alliances that existed back then, and that the Russians were the baddies. There was no debate over that. Our debate was, does the Army need so many divisions? Does the Air Force need a lot of bomber wings? Does the Navy need lots of aircraft carriers? That's what we debated. We didn't debate the fact that the Ruskies are the bad guys and NATO are our friends, and we're all going to fight to save Germany.
Nico is pointing out, will Americans help Taiwan if it gets hot? My personal belief is yes. I think we will interject if the Chinese invade Taiwan. We discussed this. I think it was on the very first live stream. But, you know, I would say any country out there in the world, like, know that there's a timer on our help. And it can be one presidency. It can be two. But eventually that's going to wear out, and America's going to hang you dry. And when I mean America, I mean whatever political power is in charge at the time. Because obviously there's a lot of motherfuckers here in the United States that are ready to gear up and strap up and go back over there and whoop some ass. I'm not saying that that's our course. That should be our course of action. I'm just saying there's a lot of us that feel that right now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, will Americans help us? That's a whole different question than will the American government help us? And I'd like to pretend that one administration or one party would be superior to the other, but I think I'm cynical enough now, and I admit it, it's cynicism. Bold face, it's cynicism. I'm cynical enough now to say, America will help any country we think we can find a profit margin in. So Taiwan will have a profit margin. Australia will have a profit margin. And if there's national security at stake, you know, Canada, well, we have a big border. So, yeah, we're going to defend them. You know what I'm saying? It's that sort of thing. If we can find, excuse me, not we, if our government can find a profit margin, a beneficial aspect to helping, then they will. But God forbid they say, what was Trump's deal or line? It was no longer a good deal. That's what he said about Afghanistan. It's not a good deal. It's a losing deal. It's a loser's deal. And so he's the one that started moving us out. Now, I don't forgive him for that. We know that this is Biden's defeat. Biden didn't have to abide by Trump's notions, and certainly hasn't on many, many other things. And so we know this is Biden's defeat. But yeah, I'm cynical enough to say we only help the people. You know, the American government only helps the people that we can find a profit margin. Now, again, the American people are the most generous. Look, when you look at giving, there's an earthquake or a tsunami or fire somewhere in the world, you'll find that the American people and the American institutions, particularly private institutions, are just magnificently generous. And the American people love liberty and are willing to, you know, send their sons and daughters into harm's way to defend liberty. So we're asking two different questions. Yes, the American people will defend you. Will the American government defend you? Come to your defense. Come to your rescue. If you pay enough.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
I want to point out Michael Mitchell's comment. He says there are rumors that Biden administration wants to pull troops out of South Korea. And this kind of circles back to a conversation we had in another live stream. The thing is about South Korea is we've been there the 60 years that it requires to build that army, to build that that country up from the ground up and reshape it. So I think South Korea can actually handle North Koreans on their own, at least in the conventional terms.
Oh, hell yeah.
But the point is we were there long enough to help them, reach that point. Well beyond 20 years, that we were in Afghanistan.
What, 71 now, I think is what it is, like 71 years in Korea.
And it wasn't, and as Chris can attest to, if you guys haven't seen his video over the silent, Korean War, he's a veteran of that silent Korean War where rounds were constantly being exchanged that you didn't hear about because it wasn't on the nightly news every night. Combat operations didn't end when the treaty was signed.
Oh, God, no. God, no. And that's Brent, that's an interesting thing. This is my cynicism kicking in again. I get really bitter about it because here's the thing. The United States government once again pulled the wool over the American people's eyes. They wanted to make sure that they suppressed all of the information of the fighting, of the casualties, of the POWs, of the deaths and KIAs. And for decades, they had an active suppression policy in effect that made sure American people did not hear about this. And we were sworn to secrecy and all this other stuff, right? And that infuriates me. This is not the way of a democracy. This is not the way of the, enlightened, founding fathers. This is just not the way. And yet, Korea was a success, specifically and expressly because the United States military hid everything from the American people. And it was an unmitigated success. It's a wonderful success.
Catastrophic victory.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah. But, to that question, when I was over in South Korea in 2014 on a business trip, I was talking to my customer and they were talking about the big buildup. I mean, the Korean Navy is becoming a massive, well-equipped force with very modern equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked them what brought this about because they really didn't work on their Navy very hard for over 50 years.
Right.
And his answer was very simple. We're not sure you're coming. And that was 2014, guys.
I want to point out Douchebag Brothers Dick's comment. He says our bases in South Korea are critical to keeping China in check. And, it's 100% accurate. There's no question that the next major armed conflict is most likely going to be with communist China. And so much so that the Marine Corps as a whole has completely revamped. I mean, we got rid of our tanks. We're restructuring our infantry. We're gearing up for this Chinese fight. And again, Afghanistan, in my opinion, man, we had Bagram Air Force Base. We had a huge footprint there that we could have maintained. And just as a little a little tack in the back of China's back that we could have operated from, giving us more capabilities. Something else that they have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked, can even American people, expect the U.S. government to help them out in the wake of a, national disaster? And I think the answer is, once again, cynically, no. What are you thinking? Of course not. I've seen it too many times. Okay, so in Joplin, Missouri, 10 years ago, whatever it was, something in this nature, you see that an F5 tornado basically went right through the middle of that city, and it is a small city, and it flattened it and destroyed it. FEMA, let me be clear, FEMA was the first agency on the ground and was so quick in getting onto the ground that it literally beat the Missouri militia. I didn't say Missouri National Guard. They didn't show up for weeks later. Missouri militia was there, I think, in 2 days, but FEMA actually beat them by about 12 hours. And that's pretty impressive, right? Here's the thing. They had hundreds of people sitting around that were getting medically to the point of dehydration. They didn't have water to actually hydrate their own 200 or 300 people. You had a You had a couple of deuce and a halves with Missouri Private Militia. It's a chartered militia with the state of Missouri. Jump off of these deuce and a halves and come in with pickup trucks. I'm 30 noon for a week, water, food, mess. They had tents. They jump off. They start doing this. Within 2 hours of getting there and offloading those vehicles, they're dispatching crews to go chainsaws and axes. FEMA comes over and says, hold it, you know, their colonel, hey, Lieutenant Colonel Sumter. He's like, hey, we don't have any leadership here. We have these people. Can we have some of your water? Can you feed us? Can we start going with your crews? That is what happened for the next 5 days, was that the 1st of the 3rd Missouri Militia unofficially led FEMA for the next 5 days. Can you count on the federal government coming to help you in a time of disaster? You better build your private militia. They're the ones who are going to fill the sandbags. They're the ones who are going to do first aid. And they're the ones with the chainsaws and the pickup trucks. Get it through your head.
Well, now that we know how you feel about it, Doc.
Well, I mean, there's so much precedent. I mean, you got Katrina. I mean, you got, remember the race riots and stuff that took place last year? I mean, at certain points during all of that, it was like, you're on your own. You know, we can't get to you. We're sorry. And so you had all these people that are, you know, non-gun owners and, you know, people that rely on, you know, like police and government to come to their, you know, their beck and call. Well, when the government says, hey, sorry, we can't get to you, you're on your own. You know, I think that was a reality check for some. But, you know, as soon as all that stuff ends, you know, everybody just goes right back into the, you know, the easy day fold.
Yeah. And look at the difference in responses down in Louisiana there that's been slammed real hard. Everything's flooded. Streets are impassable. Trees are down. And look what you see on the news. You see people out in their boats. You see people cutting trees down. And what do we see in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut? Everybody being helpless.
They pay taxes, so they're allowed to be helpless.
Oh, okay.
How that goes.
Hey, CB, I want to respond to you real quick, man. The reason that is because I finally broke down and went and bought a new laptop, and I even switched up my little setting here to give me more light so I don't have blue face. So it takes one thing you guys got to understand about me is I'm a very frugal individual. I will use stuff until literally it doesn't work no more. So I still got a pickup that's over 20 years old that I drive. It's not my primary vehicle. It's on the side, but I'm like, hey, it still runs. I'm still going to use it to get from point A to point B if I need to haul stuff. So it's just the kind of guy I am. My laptop was, you know, getting up there in the years of service. And finally just doing these live streams, I was like, damn it. I like doing these live streams. I got to upgrade my equipment. So that's what happened. I broke down and bought a new computer.
Well, then I'm next. Yeah. But you're right. Use it till it falls apart, right? Yeah. That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. Will the American government come and help? Yeah, don't hold your breath.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, so somebody, Brent Camp, who was also a Marine, that's Bruce's brother. He said, that's the jarhead in you. And it's 100% true. Marines, we know how to use old gear to its fullest extent. That's for sure.
Okay, so now I got to tell a story, and we got to get back on topic, but I got to tell this story. So, story time with Uncle Chris, and So I'm going off to Iraq is the story, and we're a piece together, you know, basically a private militia that's sanctioned through the State Department and Department of Defense, and so I deployed with MPRI, and so I'm there with mostly special forces. There's a handful of infantry, and because there were both of those, you had some Marines in there too, Marine infantry and, you know, force recon. So we're really quickly putting these two teams together and sending them as advisor teams over into Iraq to work with the Iraqi infantry. And so I get down to Fort Benning, and we go through CIF, Central Issue Facility, and they issue us all of this stuff. We're like, goddamn, this again, you know? And so we get all this stuff, and the Marines are like looking at us, they're like, this stuff is new. I got new body armor. They gave me a new Kevlar, you know? I mean, and we're like, yeah. And they're like, no, this is a lot of stuff. And they're shoving it into their A bags and stuff. And we're like, hey, chill, man. You know, chill. It's not over. And they're like, no, this is great. So we get these bags. We go off to England. Then we finally get to Kuwait. And we get into past Kuwait through customs, all this stuff. We go to an Air Force base. And there's some Air Force base, a bunch of tents and all this stuff. And they're like, hey, come on over to our CIF. We got to issue you stuff. And we're all like, oh, God, here it goes. Well, we get issued a whole nother bag of stuff. And the Marines are looking at us like, have they lost their mind? We already have all this stuff from you know, Fort Benning, Georgia. And we're like, yeah, this is the way the Army works. And so we land at BIOP, and they're like, oh, you guys, I've got 3 A bags, right? And they're like, hey, we got to do a central issue for you guys. And the Marines are just like losing their minds, like, no wonder we never get any shit. You guys got it in triplicate. And I was like, and we got to turn it all in. So just like put a padlock on it. We'll throw it in a bin somewhere. We'll come back 1 year later and turn it in because, oh man, this is bullshit. And so yeah, that's our thing. Is the Army is they issue everything. And I do remember being at a party in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and so my cousin's a F-16 pilot, Air Force, you know, fighter jock, and he sees one of his Navy fighter, you know, pilot guys. He's like, hey, Armando, come over here. And so Tony and Armando, and he goes, I got to introduce you to my cousin, Chris. He's a grunt. And Armando like puffs his chest out and he's like, oh yeah. And Tony goes, yeah, he's in the Army. And he goes, oh, and he shakes my hand. And Tony's totally flabbergasted. He's like, what? I just said he's a grunt. He's like, yeah, but he's in the Army. And Tony's like, well, what's the difference? Army, Marine? Because he's Air Force. He doesn't get it, you know? And he's like, what's the difference? Army, Marine? They're all grunts. And he's like, no, dude. The Navy doesn't hate the Army. He's like, we don't pick fights with the Army for 2 very good reasons. Number 1, whenever you see a soldier, you always see 3,500 of them. Not 2 or 3 or 4. There's 3,500 of them at a time. Number 2, every time you see a soldier, they're carrying everything they own on their back. And you're looking at them going, you're dropping them off in Guatemala going, they've got Arctic gear, those poor bastards. So that's the difference. That's why soldiers just waste everything. And the Marines are going through our dumpsters.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because at least in the recent years in the global war on terrorism, like we were getting a lot of stuff before the Army. I mean, we got the M27 IARs now. Our body armor was constantly changing as the years went on. It's like some stuff was changing and some stuff was not, but it seems like we take the lead in some aspects, and then others we fall behind. So,
yeah, I tend to give the Marines credit. I think the Marines, not always, I don't always get it right, but I think they get it right more times than the Army. The Army's big and it's a big institution and everybody's got an opinion. And so, you know, but I think the Marines' emphasis over the last 20 years has really been more often than not, it's on spot or it's on target. And I think the Army's is just really wonky crap. Like we're worried about getting everybody a beret so that they feel special.
Yeah, I'm gonna revisit that point when we get to our next topic too, Chris.
Okay.
So,
cool.
I don't even remember where we left off with Afghanistan because somebody reminded me
I know.
A major rabbit hole.
Well, the last few times it was so depressing. I think I drank too much. Yeah.
Well, I mean, where we left off is, can our allies trust us? And I think we answered that question. The answer is pretty much no.
No, absolutely not.
But also, they can trust Americans. And you see this around the world. If you look back at the Finnish Winter War, Sweden did not come to Finland's aid. However, 100,000 Swedes did.
That's it.
And, you know, depending on how active our government is preventing it, if Taiwan gets attacked, there'll be people willing to go help. It's how much help our government will allow us to give.
And you see this in the First World War in France and Italy. We were sending the Lafayette Escadrille fighters, pilots. We were sending the American Motorized Ambulance Corps Ernest Hemingway served in that. That's another private militia that went to Italy and France. So, you know, you do see not just money and material goods flow in from America, which we're known for. Okay, so that's one good thing. But you actually will see people willing to share the risk and share the horror, because we do believe in liberty. And so you see that again in World War II. You see American fighter pilots going off for the, you know, the defense of the Battle of Britain and the Flying Tigers and all of these stuff. And these guys were militia. And they were private citizens that were joining different groups all over and fighting everywhere. So, yeah, you know, that's the good news is, yes, the American people will come to your aid. Yes. Yes, they will.
Yeah. And just to comment on this comment here. Yes, we already specified that the American people are very generous. All right. And we will come to your aid. All right. We will help you. Okay. But your help has a window, and that is whatever administration gave you that promise, because as soon as they're out the door, it's a wash, bud. You're starting from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for Afghanistan. I think I can't remember if it was Les or Doc that pointed it out, but we think the fighters, the Northern Alliance, who we might add isn't the exact same Northern Alliance there was before we went in. Karzai was a big player in that, and he's already, you know, from the get-go, he was like, oh, nope, I'm happy with the Taliban, you know, and I think he's under house arrest or something, but he didn't come to the aid to the new Northern Alliance, which is not, it's a shadow of what it was prior to us going in. Yeah. In 01. So, but I think, was it Chris or Les said that he thinks that they went across the border and, you know, may or may not operate from over there. Who knows? Time will tell.
Well said.
So that being said, let's segue into our next topic, Chris. I know we got a lot of new people tuning in, so if you could reiterate what our second point was going to be over, and you can kick it off.
I got to grab another beer for this. All right. All right. Well,
since you're rearming,
and maybe I should start with an apology to Brent's, you know, 0331 YouTube channel for now putting it in infamy, because I don't know, I've got some. Look, I'm not going to shy away from my opinions, and I will own up that they're just opinions. I reserve the right to be wrong, and I am. Don't you dare tell my wife, but I'm more frequently wrong than I'm right. But I've got her convinced it's the opposite. So just bear with me. That said, you know, guys, I'm not going to say things that I don't believe. On the other hand, sometimes it so happens that my understanding matures over time, and I do reserve the right to say, wow, I was wrong then, and do a 180. But you asked me today what I believe, and my question really comes down to this, and I'll get into some of the background that I've been seeing in the blogosphere, YouTube, just everywhere this last week. And my question that I'm asking, that frankly a whole lot of people are beginning to ask, is in its broadest way, I would say it's this: are Western men willing to defend Western values? Let me put it this way. I'm quoting other people here, and I'm stealing their ideas. If I ever tell you another, you know, disclaimer, if I ever tell you that I've had an original thought in my head, I am lying to you. I rip off everybody. Okay. And that's how academics are. We just build on everybody else. So me too. Anyway, look, earlier this year, the gay pride parade, LGBTQ pride parade flag flew from the embassy in Kabul. Okay. It's not flying there now, but it did. And America was trying to make a point. And the point is that, hey, we value diversity, and we are egalitarian, and, you know, and we're woke. And so you must bow to this Marxist woke culture. Okay. and people are calling it cultural Marxist. Okay, I'm just rearranging the words. Cultural Marxist, wokeism. It's a belief. It's an ideology that you're not allowed to question. And so that was flown over their embassy, over our embassy in Kabul, and it's not there now. Biden's defeat is complete with the Panjshir Valley falling. It is total. It is complete. It is irreprehensible. It is inexplainable. And it cannot be dismissed. And yet, at the same time, what we have to recognize is the Taliban won. And I mean, they won a strategic victory in spite of every single tactical failure they ever had, which was all of them, for the last 20 years. But now we were saying, hey, guys, women are important. Homosexuality is just a preference. Wokeism. And the Taliban said no and defeated it. And Mary Harrington, the feminist writer, I forget which magazine she writes for, but anyway, and she is genuinely shocked and not happy with this and not happy with Western men. But she's asking the right question. She's saying, how is it that we're espousing the wonderful benefits of Marxist culturalism and Western men are cheering the fact that the Taliban, at least some Western men in Western nations, not just in America alone, but she's noting that they are cheering in social media the Taliban's defeat of, cultural woke Marxism. And so that has me asking, yeah, is that what we're defending? Let me back up for a second. And let me say, I'm not blaming soldiers. I'm not blaming Marines. That happened in the end of Vietnam, and that was bullshit, guys. Let's call a duck a duck. That was bullshit to see strategic defeat of Nixon as administration blamed on the men and the women who served on the ground in Vietnam. And I will not do that. I will not entertain that here. But I am willing to say, let's do lessons learned. And I mean, a woke military. Apparently they weren't willing to fight for it. I think, and I don't mean they, again, the soldiers, that's not who I'm blaming. This is Biden's defeat. So what I'm saying is I think Biden has advisors, and I have to believe that they did an assessment and they said, oh, Mr. President, we've been this cultural woke Marxist military now since 2015 at a bare minimum. We've been trying to shove it down their throat for 20 years prior to that, but since 2015 we've done it. You have to understand it in 6 years, everybody who joins the military today, 4 years later, not everybody, but the vast majority of them, 4 years later, move on, unless they're an officer, and then it's 6 years later, and then they move on. So in 6 years, you're on a whole new quote unquote, what's the word I'm like, generation. So you've had a generation. There's no fair saying, well, we just started wokeism, we just started cultural diversity in the military, give it a chance. Dude, it's already had its generation. And it seems like Biden's advisors came and said, the Taliban aren't playing around. They won't deal with us. We keep trying to cancel their culture, and they want to shoot us in the face. I think we should leave, sir. Because that's what a woke military does.
Yeah. I think it's crazy because when I first came into the Marine Corps, and I know the military that you guys served in was a different time as well, right? And I joined after both of y'all. And I can tell you from when I came in to now, the change is just, it's crazy how much has changed over the years. So when I first came in, it was, don't ask, don't tell. You could not be an openly gay serving service member. And hey, you know what? I don't care. Your sexual preference is what it is. That doesn't. My only question as a Marine is this change going to make us more lethal at killing our enemies? And right. If the answer to that question is no, then we don't need to implement it. If the answer to that question is yes, or it's not going to affect it, then okay, let's look at this. Okay, so that is the only thing that should be asked. And I think I think the biggest change that I saw was when they, under the Obama administration, when they wanted to essentially force integration of combat MOSs with females. And the Marine Corps, as far as I can remember, was the only branch of the service that says, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. And we're not just going to say that. We're going to show you. The Marine Corps took a bunch of money, and we're one of the smallest branches of the armed forces. We don't have a lot of money to spend, but we put on this big demonstration of 3 different rifle platoons, right? One was completely female, one was integrated, and one was all male, standard, regular infantry male rifle platoon. And the male rifle platoon completely outperformed both the integrated and the 100% female platoon. And the Marine Corps said, hey, this is our findings. This is how significantly different it is. And they presented that, and the top level said, we don't care. You're going to integrate. So, again, going back to my original question, does this change affect our combat effectiveness? If the answer is yes, then let's look at it. Or if it doesn't affect it, let's look at it. But if it's no, we shouldn't be looking at making that change.
Allow me to do a little virtue signaling. I think virtue signaling isn't inherently bad. It's virtue signaling without virtue that is bad. But what I'm going to say is this. I was in the United States Army Infantry when the Clinton administration enacted Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I actually got the pleasure of being in an Army-wide study whereby they studied X amount of people, and I got, a questionnaire and an interview. That's really all it was. I bump into the interviewer, no joke, like 18 months later in a bar in Maryland somewhere, and we recognized each other. I was like, hey, what was the outcome of that? And while he said there were many different outcomes and there was many different findings, and it had a pretty broad scope that it was looking at, one of the most interesting things to him that he said was the finding that when they polled all of these soldiers, they surveyed all these soldiers, it was something like, I don't exactly really remember the numbers, and he didn't share the data with me anyway, but he said it's something like 3 out of 4 infantry or combat arms guys, that's what it was, artillery, anybody in combat arms, 3 out of 4 of them didn't care. That was their thing, is you don't understand how exhaustively I do not care who you want to sleep with. My question is, can you do this job? And it was like 75%, which in statistical data is a pretty significant set, right, in and of itself. And he said it was photo negative. He said that was the shock, was that all the rear echelon, the service support, combat support, the rear echelon units, it was inverted. That 3 out of 4, 75% of them said, no way, no, I don't want to be in a military that has gays openly serving. And so it's very interesting. So I'm with you, Brent. I don't give a damn. I don't. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm proud of that. And I don't give a damn who sleeps with who. Just doesn't matter. But I do care whether you can do your job. And it isn't just the Marines doing it once. The Marines actually did that same study in 1995. And the criticism of it was, well, you didn't have, Ivy League universities involved that were double checking all of your statisticians to make sure you weren't slanting it. And this is like the late 90s. And that's why they turned around and did it again. What was that, 2012 through 2015? It was a very exhaustive study, and it involved, I want to say, Princeton and all sorts of outside viewers and everything else. And they came up with the same findings. Hold on, full stop. That was with the infantry in the United States Marine Corps. So the Israelis did it with the armor, and they did the exact same thing. A platoon of females, a platoon of males, and a platoon of mixed gender teams, and they came out with the exact same curve, that the all-male teams performed in many different metrics, not the least of which was accuracy and speed. But in many different metrics, they outperformed the mixed gender and the female platoons. Full stop. The British did this with artillery. So now you got the United States Marines doing it with infantry, the British doing it with the artillery, and the Israelis doing it with armor units. All of them finding the exact same thing. And so in 2015, when the Marines fought the good fight and said, look, guys, this is not the right way. Women serve proudly. They have a wonderful tradition of warriorhood in our service. And this is not an us against them any more than it's a straight against the gays or men against women. It's where is your value added? And they have abilities to answer those questions. And I resent that this has become a male against female thing. Bullshit. Bullshit. Women have served proudly since even before we had a military. Okay? But there's certain areas they excel at and they're value added, and there's certain areas they don't excel at and they are a liability. In every patrol, you're an asset or a liability. And so now infantrymen and artillerymen and armor have to take not the B team, not the C team or the D team, but the F team into battle. G, I don't think the Taliban was too terribly afraid of us.
Yeah. One more thing, and I want to kick over to Les because he's been awfully quiet.
Locke was on a good rant there.
And this is kind of circling back to, you know, like the gay flag flying in the Kabul embassy or U.S. embassy in Kabul. I remember back in Iraq, you know, and this is before women integration and everything. This is 2004 time frame. And I was seeing Army MP units, right? And they had female soldiers up in their gun trucks. Now, on his face, hey, if that woman can, you know, man a 50 cal, you know, by all means. But here's another problem, though. You got to understand your enemy, all right? You're in a part of the world that views women as, you know, I don't want to say subhuman, but they don't
second class
think they're on the same. Sure. Second class citizens is better terminology. Okay, if the enemy sees her in the turret and they have that mindset, what does that do to them? That emboldens them. Hey, let's launch this ambush. They have women in their turrets. We're going to be successful. Let's fight this through because we know that the women are the ones that are manning those guns there, and we're going to be successful. All right, so they have that mindset. Hey, no wings half the battle, right, G.I. Joe? So, I mean, that is something that needed to be taken in consideration when we're operating in these types of countries where they have those views, right? You can't let the enemy win psychological battles like that. And that was absolutely happening over there in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
Look, I'll go you one farther, and I'm sorry, Les, we really need to let you jump in.
Good rant, guys, good rant.
It not only emboldens our enemies, it not only emboldens that, I accept that. I accept that. The data says that they don't perform as well, but it wouldn't even matter if they did in the enemy's eyes, because the enemy is saying, hey, you know, we don't believe they perform as well. And so I think it emboldens them. But let's talk about the impact it has on the American warrior. What's that?
Oh, I'm pointing to you on my screen, but it's actually inverted.
Okay.
I had to go this way.
Yeah, blame it on me. So here's what I'm trying to get to. What I'm trying to get to is I have actually spoken with a handful. I don't want to pretend, you know, anecdote isn't data. I don't want to pretend that I have any data on this. But it is amazing to me that the consistency of the small number of males that I have spoken with in both Marine and Army, serving in infantry, specifically infantry, who have said, no, that's not true. I've spoken to some tankers too, who said the same thing. I don't want to serve with women. And it's not for all the reasons many people think. It's not like, oh, because they won't pull your weight and you're going to have to do it, or, oh, you're going to get for sexual harassment. And they're like, oh, yeah, the Me Too is very real. But that's not what it's about. They're saying, look, I thought I was joining the military to defend my nation and defend my tribe. I thought I was going to defend people. I thought I was going to defend grandma and her little lap dog. I thought I was going to defend my little sister and, you know, the elderly and the weak and everything else. And they're like, now they're letting women in. So why don't we let people in wheelchairs in? No, legitimate question. Why is someone with a disability, or why is someone who's elderly, or why is someone who's 7 years old protected from this service, but the women aren't? Well, the women volunteered to. So a 9-year-old can volunteer. The point here is that the male warriors thought that they were going to defend their nation. They thought that they were putting themselves in hardship and putting themselves, you know, doing that service because it was a valuable and necessary service. When they look to the left and right of them, they see their sisters there and they say, what are you doing here? And this is them telling me. And again, the message has been very, very consistent. When they say, well, I'm here to help. Well, then I don't need to be here. Take it, sister. Bye.
Interesting point. Well, I'm going to say this. In my Marine Corps career, I had the extreme pleasure of serving under Master Sergeant Karen Houchin, one of the finest Marines I've ever served with. She was incredible at what she did, so much so that if there were disputes over how things done, FMF PAC bowed to her. She was recognized as the expert in her field. She became the first women CCA of an amphibious ship, the USS Wasp, an incredible human being, and one I'm proud to say I maintained a friendship with after active duty. She was that rock solid a person, and God bless her soul, she has passed on. And I'd have no qualms following her anywhere. If that's into enemy machine guns, right there with her. Now, all that being said, she was an exception to the rule.
Well, okay, so now you're getting into the exception, right?
You know, women have a place in the military. There are things they do better than us guys.
100%.
I think we all, and I know I'm going to sound traditionalist and sexist here, but we'd all much rather the S1 have a bunch of ladies in it than the usual no loads that are there screwing everything the hell up. All right. We want them in our mess sections because you can get edible frickin' food when they're there. You know?
True.
Yeah. They have their places. They have proven to be incredibly effective at commanding warships. So let's let them be there.
And pilots.
Pilots, another great example.
Pilots, they've proven this, and and they've always served since Florence Nightingale on, and even before. The truth is, they've served in the medical corps, putting their ass on the line time and time again. Many of them have recognized for meritorious valor. Because of this. Look, this isn't, again, I resent that this is an us against them. And let me say, I can talk about Sergeant Lewis and Sergeant Rich, two junior NCOs that I got the pleasure of working with in the NCO academies. Brilliant, just fantastic young women and warriors. Tammy Reyes, Major Tammy Reyes, a personal mentor of mine when I was working at CGSC, Command and General Staff College. Look, that's what I'm saying is, these women have had dynamic careers, and if you wanted to change something, you should have taken away the good old boy nepotism in 2015 and said, you know what, we're done with this. No more, your career is made because you served in combat arms, but those women their career can't be made because they didn't serve it. We should have changed that instead of sending women to fail. We should have taken care of our soldiers. We should have taken care of our soldiers.
And one of the things we have to recognize about certain jobs in the military is just the physical differences between men and women. You know, a lady is not going to break track as easy as one of us is. It's a simple fact. You have to be big, strong, and muscular to get a 120 millimeter Sabo round out of the magazine and into the breech of a cannon. You know, we have to recognize that fact, and it's just the way it is. And if we don't recognize those facts, we're going to get a lot of people killed, including the people we're trying to help, the ladies.
There's one Lance Corporal out there that I just wanted to high five and promote her on the spot if I was, king for the day. I was watching, this is back in 2015. I was watching this group of Marine females who had just completed School of the Infantry. And I think they had started with 40 some odd, and they'd gotten down to six. Six completed it. And this is the enlisted version of it. And so they go to this one, Hispanic or Latina, and she's sitting there. She's Lance Corporal, and she's just sweating. I mean, she's finished, the ruck. She's got her weapon on. She's like, oh, my God. And the female reporter came over and like, you have completed it. You are going to graduation. She's like, yes, I wanted to do this. She talked a little bit about her grandfather who served in, I think, Vietnam and stuff. And she's like, this is very important to me. And she's like, wow, you've done it. You are one of the very few female Marines who have completed School of the Infantry. So, which infantry unit do you want to deploy to with fleet? And she gets this look on her face. She's like, the hell are you talking about? And she goes, well, don't you want to be an infantryman? And she's like, no, I don't. She was incredulous. She's like, I don't want to be an infantryman. She's like, do you know what it's like carrying that much weight on a 12-mile force march? She's like, female hips are biologically different than male hips. We're not built for this. And I just went, Marine, you're the smartest person in the entire School of the Infantry today. I was just like, fan-friggin-tastic.
So anyways.
Good rant,
yeah,
Doc.
I think we beat that dead to a horse. So, but yeah, that's just one example of, you know, the Marine Corps tried to say, hey, here's scientific evidence. This isn't going to increase our combat effectiveness, and the government said, no, you will do this, and we've just seen that trend, you know, with certain things continue ever since then. Probably before that also, but in my career, that was kind of the first thing I saw was that moving forward, where it's just like, nope, this is going to be mandated. This is what's going to happen, regardless of what your particular service wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of a related thing, but do you mind if I jump over there? And I think both, did you guys get to see the Bill Maher's, you know, his
yes.
little rant on, wow. What's your thought on that?
Well, there's probably a lot of people that haven't seen it. So if you could, Doc, just kind of paraphrase what happened.
Okay, good point. I brought it up. That's fair. So Bill Maher had a piece this week, at least it was released this week, who said, you know, look, basically what he said was this. Taliban is bad, real bad, okay? Bad to women, bad to minorities, bad to people with disabilities, bad to homosexuals, you know, bad. Look, he's like, his point was, again, he talked about cultural Marxism, and basically he was talking about, you know, specifically wokeism. And he was saying, wokeism has us believing that America is bad, that it's, you know, critical race theory says that everything is a power struggle, and that there's just nothing but we were built on the backs of slaves, and we are built nothing but sexist, racist oppressors. And his point there was, can we stop for a minute now that the Taliban has defeated us in, you know, in Afghanistan and defeated our wokeism? Can we now be honest and stop equating America with real oppression? And so he talked about homosexuals being thrown over, you know, off tall buildings for being homosexuals. He talked a specific case about a comedian who was beheaded because he used humor to try and get people to see all sides of the issue. You know, and he gave one atrocity after another, and he's like, you know, I'm done. I'm done hearing in any kind of, like, you know, I guess sympathetic ear that America is built on bad, and we are equal to the Taliban. The Taliban rejected our cultural Marxism. I just thought that was really spot on, that he was trying to put in perspective. You know, I think he was struggling to offer a dissenting view, which is not welcome by Marxists. He was trying to offer that. I thought, and I don't know how well it was received. I don't know how well you guys think it was received, but I thought it was an interesting effort.
Yeah, to kind of summarize what he was saying is, you know, obviously Bill Maher is a you know, big time liberal. He has been for his whole career. Doesn't exactly see things our way, but he's like, don't you guys think, you know, talking to his fellow, you know, people that follow his ideology, he's like, don't you guys think, you know, we should tone down the America is bad and unjust and all this, when you literally have people clinging onto the wheel wells of C-17s to escape the Taliban? Like, there aren't people falling off airplanes trying to escape the United States. It's the opposite. People are clinging to wheel wells with the hope of potentially reaching the United States one day. So he's like, you know, pretty much, hey, fellow peer liberals, you know, America isn't this bastion of, you know, racism and sexism and homophobia that, you know, a lot of the people on that particular persuasion of thought are, you know, constantly pushing. and ramming down the throats of the American people.
Exactly.
I mean, we have our warts, and he said that, and he's willing to concede that, and he's willing to discuss those warts. But he's saying, let's do that within a realistic framework. Let's recognize where we don't get it right, how we might get it right, how we might improve. But let's not try and equate it to, identified extreme evils. One after another. We can think it up. Fascism, communism, all sorts of totalitarianisms. But I think when I read that and I looked at Mary Harrington's, and if you haven't read Mary Harrington's piece, it's worth your 5 minutes to read it. Look it up. She's asking, what about our message? And again, another very leftist, right? She's a feminist, a Marxist feminist. And she's saying, what about our message isn't resonating with Western men? Why don't Western men, love what we're selling? And how is it that, the Taliban was so successful at countering what we were selling? Questions worth asking.
It's different culture. You can't go into that culture, and push, all this, which in that part of the world is radical ideas. You can't just, impose that on them, and you're just going to it's going to end up being what it ended up being. Right.
Yeah. People like what they know, like an old leather jacket. It's comfortable. You're happy with what you know. And like the old saying goes, the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And they may hate communism. They may hate Marxism, but they know it. They understand it. They know how to get by in that culture, in that world. And then you hit them with this radical idea of, hey, you're free. You can do whatever the hell you want. They almost can't process it. And the fear of experiencing it a lot of time prevents people from making that leap over to changing their mind, changing their paradigm of life. And they stick with this old way that they know just because they know it.
Okay, so PragerU with, I will butcher that woman's name. Let me try. I'll make an effort here. PragerU, I think just today, Ian Hersey Ali, she is like, I don't know what country she's, Somalia, Syria. I know they're not right next to each other. I don't know where she's from, but she is an author who came here, 12 years ago, and is now death threats and everything else because she speaks out against Islam, and she's from Islam. I mean, but she speaks out against its, its most radical incantations, its most violent incantations, and so she speaks out against that. And she's got a PragerU 5-minute video out today that's something about a comparison of wokeism to Islamism, or Islamism. Anyway, also worth your 5 minutes. But she is comparing the extremes of both ideologies of wokeist, woke Marxist and Islamic, Taliban. And she says she does a comparison and a contrast. The contrast is, how are these different? And she succinctly says, well, they're nothing alike in some ways. Here's, this radical religious thought. Here's a atheist who, deny religion. But then she starts to say, but how are they the same? And she shows that their tactics of oppression and use of language are remarkably similar. And they have very, very remarkably similar outcomes. Their goals, their objectives of totalitarian oppression are similar. And so I think that that's something worth looking at, because it raises the question, guys, do you remember when we went into Iraq? And obviously we went into Afghanistan too, but we were mostly asking this question about Iraq way back in the day. People were saying, up until 2007, did we go in too softly? Did we go in too softly? Did we go in and try to be too inclusive? Maybe we should have actually focused on defeating the people whose ideologies weren't congruent with ours. And I think we can ask the same question of Afghanistan. And we can say, yeah, we went in there, but we said, we're rescuers. We're not invaders. We're not here to take over the country. We are going to rescue the country, you see? And I think that took what she was saying is a materialistic view. Let me explain what she means by that. She's saying, look, the reason people are Islamist is because they don't have the material wealth to be anything else. And then she points out that, by the way, cultural Marxists here in America say the reason black people are downtrodden is because they don't have the material wealth to be anything else. And she says, you know, like a lot of people this resonates with because they think, oh, that's all that I need to do. Wow, I can do that. We can just give them jobs and education and a nice house and a nice car, and they're going to stop their ideology. The materialistic solution, identifying it as the problem, then the solution says, if we do this, Iraqis and Afghanistan, they'll love us. Taliban will give up what they do. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And that makes me wonder, you know, I hated it. It was so stodgy. I was like, oh, 2006, we're going to talk about this. We didn't kill enough Iraqis in Afghanistan. You know, the people of Afghanistan, we didn't kill enough of them. So that's it. I kind of rejected it. I mean, I saw some merit to the argument, but I rejected it back then. Now, today, I'm asking again, I'm back to that going, yeah, you know what? We really did have this materialistic. If we can just give them nice houses and cars and a good education, they're going to be just like us. And we never went after their ideology. You think about when we invaded territory in Germany and in Japan. Man, when I say we went after their ideology, we set them on fire in caves. And we didn't give quarter. We didn't take prisoners. They didn't offer, and we didn't take it. We killed them in millions. We went right for the jugular, and we didn't apologize to anyone. And after we've killed just about everybody we needed to kill, then we allowed them to surrender. And still look at that. Look at the MacArthur Plan in Japan. Look at the Marshall Plan in Europe, 1946, right? 45, 46. For that matter, look at the Truman Doctrine in the late 40s and goes on in past into Korea and past it. Yes, each one of those doctrines said we will be inclusive. We will draw in value added and new perspectives and new peoples. We will do that in a time and a place where it seems beneficial to us. Eventually, we'll get to everybody, but if it takes us 50 years, so be it. Because first, we're going to kill everybody we disagree with. I don't know.
You know, it's an interesting thing you bring up, Doc. Back in the early 2000s, right after the invasion, I had a guy working in my warehouse. And he had fought in the Iraqi army in the first Gulf War. And he'd been captured by U.S. forces. And he found out while in our capture that his village revolted against Saddam. And Saddam solved his problem very simply. He put his village under 20 feet of water and killed everybody in it.
Wow.
And he convinced enough Americans that he didn't get sent back to Iraq. And he told me in 2006, straight up, you know why you're having problems in Iraq? You're not killing enough people. He goes, Saddam was a bad, evil dude, and you defeated him. He's like, if you want to prove you're better than Saddam, you need to kill a whole lot more people. And his whole theory was when Muqtada Sadr took a position in the Iraqi parliament, he said a U.S. infantryman should have walked in and executed him in his seat.
I fought that guy. we had him completely surrounded, him and his little militia, completely surrounded, and some deal was brokered to let them just walk right out the door. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Al-Najaf, is that where you're fighting? Yeah, okay. You got to meet another guy in One Shepherd. He was in that fight too. Got a Purple Heart. Got blown up with a mortar.
Really?
Around towards the mosque. He was fighting through the cemetery. Yeah. Wow. Well, okay. So, wow.
I mean, let's look in the world wars, both Germany and Japan. We bombed the living shit out of everything. And as much as the Air Force wants to claim all their precision, you know, sometimes they miss their targets by miles, but they decimated entire neighborhoods. And if the factory they were going after was important enough, they just leveled the whole town to make sure they got it. You know, the amount of civilians killed was just staggering. In Dresden, where we firebombed that city at the end of the war, when the Soviets took over that zone, they put up a monument just like to the people of Germany, just like they put up to their Soviet soldiers killed, because they didn't see a difference in it. And look in Japan, we make a big deal about, oh, Hiroshima killed all these people. Hiroshima was nothing. The firebombing of Tokyo killed 100,000 people. Kobe and Nagoya, 80,000 people each. You know, the firebombings did so much more killing than the atomic bombs did. Matter of fact, the reason Hiroshima and Nagasaki got picked is we had pretty much turned all the big cities into crispy toast.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So a few weeks ago when I came on this show, I was the unpopular guy. I think I'm still the unpopular guy. All right. So
well,
I was
you're not a Marine, so you're not one of the cool kids, Chris.
Well, that's it. That's it. Damn it. I got
True.
picked on. There's more soldiers than Marines. That never happens. Anyway, so I was the unpopular guy who said, look, we lost in Afghanistan because we didn't stay it long enough. And then I gave several examples, historic examples, where we don't stay long enough and we lose strategically. And then I gave several examples, notably Germany, Italy, Japan, Korea. There's others. I gave several different examples where we stay a minimum of the 60 years and we win. But even at that time, I said, I recognize that I'm being too simplistic. It's much more complex than that. And so now I have an opportunity here. And in retrospect, and listening to what you were saying, Les, I think that's it. I do need to back off there. It's not that I don't believe what I said. I do. But it is more complex than that. First off, I think we made two other critical mistakes. Two critical mistakes that would have helped us be more productive, even in the first 20 years, and certainly in the next, 20 years and 20 years, so a total of 60 years. Number one, unlike those other examples that I gave, we didn't kill the people who disagreed with us before we even pursued peace. We did that in the other places. Mussolini was dead. Hitler was dead. We slaughtered Japanese and North Koreans and Chinese. My point is, if you disagreed with us during the war, we killed you. And we did it without apology. We let our grandchildren, 2 generations later in the 80s and 90s, wring their hands and say, oh, I'm sorry, we're so good at killing you. We let them worry about that. But Grandpa, nah, he went off to kill the bad guys, and Grandma cheered him on, right? And when he came back, she said, let's have babies. Okay, so that's one thing that we did differently. We did differently, right? We didn't kill the bad guys. We didn't kill the people who disagreed with us. We tried to incorporate them, and we tried to bring them into the fold. And you know what? To some degree, that made sense to me, and still does, to some degree. But I think we went way too far. The other thing, it's clear that we did, and I guess this is really what I'm getting to when I keep talking about the cultural Marxism and wokeism. They're both the same. It's all is that we promoted in those countries an ideology that did not resonate with them. In fact, it offended the people of Afghanistan and Iraq. Let me give you just one example. And this is true in both countries, by the way. It shows you how woefully we understood their culture. There are 3 ways in the Arab culture for your clan, your tribe, to mix with another tribe. There are 3 ways. 1, you marry into it. Okay, cool. You marry, you cross-marry. Hey, we're all one clan now. The second way is to formally petition the more powerful clan. Hey, I've got these goats, but you have all the water wells. Can we be a protectorate? Can we merge with your clan? Everybody talks. There's a big party. It's like a marriage. Yeah, okay, we're all the same clan now. That's the second way to become one. The third way is to engage in warfare and lose. The dominant clan is the clan. So when Americans were doing a thunder run driving into Baghdad, and you have to understand that I was an advisor to the Iraqi infantry, and so they all told me stories about their mothers and grandmothers cooking while we're bombing the city and our tanks are going through, lighting up everything. The Iraqi women were cooking. Why were they cooking? They said, we have to cook for the Americans. Why are you cooking for the Americans? Well, duh, they're winning. We're going to be part of their clan now. We're going to be part of America. Because that's the Iraqi answer. That's the Arab answer. But America walked in and said, no, no, no. You don't understand. We may have defeated you, but we need to rebuild with an Iraqi solution, not an American solution. It has to be an Iraqi solution. All the Iraqis are going, hey, dumbass, your clan won. We're now one people. That is the Iraqi solution. But the Americans didn't understand that. And so right away, we started saying, no, 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 no. Let us give money, and we will give money along sectarian lines, that is, to the Shia and the Kurds, because we don't want to be seen as one side unfairly favoring one or the other, because we know that the Baathists did this. Holy crap. That's what essentially gave rise to the sectarian violence. Well, I'm not going to say it's the only thing. Once again, I'm being overly simplistic. But holy crap, did we throw the match into the tinderbox when we said, we're going to reward you. We're going to give you the means to live and for your family and clan to be successful based on which form of Islam you worship. Man, we sold the wrong ideology. We sold them wokeism. We sold them plurality and diversity and inclusion. We sold them that, and we lost both times.
Good rant, Doc.
Yeah.
Brent, you said I could rant tonight.
No, I am. I'm just I'm trying to moderate some of these comments here.
I appreciate that because he's never inviting me back. I want you to know. So.
Well, one of the things is, you do have to establish victory over your enemy in a way he cannot deny it. That's on the physical level, that's on the morality level, and that's on the perception level.
Yeah.
And just taking his capital does not automatically give you all three. It'll give you physical for sure. Yeah, you're sitting in his seat, but it doesn't give you the moral capital, and it doesn't give you the perception capital. If the enemy sits there and thinks he's still got a chance to fight, even though you've taken his capital, he's going to fight. You've got to defeat him in detail. And that's what we did. In the case of the Germans, it was a little different in the fact that they had the Russians coming in from the east, and they knew how bad the Russians could be. And they looked at us as a much lesser evil. So they were quickly willing to kowtow to whatever we wanted, just so they didn't have to deal with the Russians. Mm-hmm. The Japanese, on the other hand, had a very feudal society based on a hierarchical that a living person was an actual deity. And because we respected that deity, and the deity said, you're going to do what the Americans say to do, they fell right in line because that was in their cultural norm to do so.
I think that's where MacArthur and General MacArthur, General Marshall, and President Truman get it right. I think that they were, again, firstly, that they defeated their enemies so that no one denied it and said, yeah, that's a done deal. And that secondly, they were able to come in and say, let me sell you an idea that you'll buy into, right? Let me respect you enough to say that ultimately you'll come up with German and Italian and Japanese and Korean solutions. You will ultimately come up with your own solutions, but allow me to sell you the concept, the idea. And it was something that they could buy into. I think we failed in Iraq and Afghanistan to do those things. We didn't win them over. We didn't. They didn't understand, and we didn't understand them.
True enough. To answer that last highlighted comment you put up, Brent, about where will the Taliban get their money to run the stand, that's an easy question. Opium.
Yeah.
Well, that, and you look at all these countries sending aid over there. I mean, even our presidential administration currently is talking about sending aid over there. Why? Like, are you kidding me? Are we forgetting about everything that just happened? I mean, this stuff drives me nuts. Let them fail. Let them fail.
Oh, I
and
agree.
Let them see how good it was, right, under our little experiment, and then they will overrun the Taliban and reinstate a friendly government. Why are we setting them up for success? It drives me nuts. Stuff kills me, guys. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It comes down to use a popular term, Trump derangement syndrome. This administration has, if no matter what it is, if Trump did A, they must do B. Trump was having a war with them, so they must be extra nice to these people. It's just that simple. Now, the fact that Trump was having a war with these people that their previous administration and administration before that was having a war is irrelevant, because facts, though interesting, are not a factor. So, yeah, I understand this administration doing it because Trump was fighting them, so they must give them aid. That's the dichotomy of our current administration. Pick a subject, prove me wrong.
Yeah. Drives me nuts.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I was saying, yeah, it's once again, I don't know that I can't defend Marxism to you. Let me put it that way, Les. I cannot defend Marxism to you.
No, and there's no defense of it. It fails everywhere it goes. It offers a great promise that, the very poor can't walk away from because they have nothing to lose, and the very rich can afford it. And that's why it stays a popular idea hundreds of years after failing everywhere. And, the usual, when you point that out to the Marxists that, hey, this fails everywhere you try it, they'll say, oh, it wasn't implemented correctly.
I mean, when we say that, it was just earlier this year that Putin turned to the Duma and really admonished them. They were saying something about, oh, well, there was this movement of, I don't know what the political infighting was, but it was, well, we had it better under the communists. And he publicly stood in front of the Duma and admonished them, saying, look, guys, you had 72 years to make communism work, and it failed us, and you failed, and we failed everywhere we implemented it. So I'm done hearing about how communism was better and how communism could achieve things for us. It couldn't, it didn't, and we're better off now without it. That was just earlier this year. That's Jesus Christ. When
to that point, I remember an interview back when he was still alive. This interviewer was asking Castro about Cuban brand communism, and he goes, is it still effective for the world? And Castro straight up said, he goes, Cuban brand communism doesn't even work in Cuba anymore. I know that's just an anecdote, but even he could see that, and here's a man who took, Cuban communism went to Africa on its own. It didn't go at the behest of the Soviets. It went on its own, and it defeated the South Africans. So it had a track record that some could call success. But even Castro could sit there and look and go, no, this ain't working anymore.
Well, militaristically, it certainly had a successful track record. I don't think economically or politically it did, but militaristically it certainly did.
Yeah, but any form of government can point to a successful militaristic style.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy on here called 123456 or something like that, and he's posting comments acting like we're defending Trump. I mean, I don't know how many times we've gone after Trump on his decisions. I fault him as well. All right, I mean, he has made a whole host. Dr. Larsen has gone after him too. Yes, he came at Afghanistan with a businessman's perspective, like, hey, let's make a deal. That's his thing, right? Wrote books on how to make a deal. So that's what he did. He brought the enemy in to make a deal with them. And then, unfortunately, he lost the election. And then the next administration came in. They kept that same deal, but they didn't help out our allies to help, So, nobody's defending Trump here. We think he's just as culpable for this whole mess as Biden to a certain extent. I think he would have handled the pullout better. but I've already gone on the record on these live streams and talked about how I thought we should have kept the foothold just as a big FU to the, the Chinese and to the Islamic extremists in the region.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody checked out this week's episode of the Bad News Network, and they made a good point that makes you think. They were saying, who's at fault in Afghanistan? And they were like, well, it was Bush's fault. He went there. Obama kept us there. Trump made a bad deal. Biden didn't reverse Trump's deal. And then he said the Congress didn't have oversight. And then he said, ultimately, though, who's at fault is us, because we didn't hold anybody's feet to the fire. This war went on for 20 years, and we weren't bothered by it. Most people didn't go about it in their daily lives. It wasn't on the news every day. And we didn't make our politicians do something about it. He goes, so everybody's at fault. I'm not sure I agree with everything in his premise, but at the same token, he makes a fair point.
Yeah, well, I think we all share some culpability here, some far more than others. But and you guys have already heard me say in previous shows that, look, if you want to go back to, if we want to go in a time machine back to 2002 and 2003, you'll find that I was a fence sitter. Let me be very clear. I was not a fence sitter in 1991. I was very much for going into Iraq in 1991. In the 1980s, I was very much for going into Afghanistan. I wasn't a fence sitter back then. It was very, black and white is a bit of a stretch, but there wasn't much gray in 1988 and 1991. In 2002 and 2003, there was so much gray that it was very, very hard for me to know what was the right way ahead. So no. But this is like saying, the boyfriend and girlfriend saying, well, I just wanted a quickie in the back seat of my car. I didn't know there was going to be a kid out of it. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's all fine. I get it. We're all human. You made a mistake. But the reality is now there's a kid. Now there's a kid. So you do right by the kid, right? And humans do this. We get into all sorts of things, marriage and businesses with no exit plan whatsoever, right? So, okay, welcome to life. I'm not saying we should have gone into Afghanistan in 2002. That's not my message at all. I reject that. I'm saying once we're there, good God, if for nothing else, for self-preservation, fight to win. And beyond that, beyond your own self-preservation, maybe think about the people that you came to save. And maybe you think about the people who backed you up, your allies, your friends from NATO and Asia and all points in between. Wow. No. Being defeated dishonors them, especially when we had all the conditions for success. If that makes me unpopular, so be it.
Yeah, Brent Camp posted a comment that, every president has his issues. Yes, everybody's a human being. Not everybody's going to make the right decision. I think, President Reagan was a great president, but, guess what? We got one of the worst gun control pieces of legislation under him. Nobody's perfect, and nobody's always going to do the right thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Look. I'm gonna date myself here terribly. My last president, the president, I'm like, yeah, the president. The last president that represented my interest was Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, the Bull Moose Party. All right. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. And I would love to be a libertarian. If we could get rid of all the libertarians out of that party, it would be a great party. I think that's just it. I don't feel like I've ever had representation at the national level. My ideas and my value sets have never had representation in Congress, upper or lower house, in the White House, and probably not even truly in the Supreme Court. That said, that puts me in a position where I can take each presidential administration at its value. I don't feel like anybody's pulling the wool over my eyes. I did not vote for Biden. I did not vote for Obama either time, and I did not like him as a president. But once in a while, You know, Blind Chicken gets the kernel of corn. He did some cool shit. I was like, whoa, once in a while, he did things that really impressed me. And I went, all right, good on you, man. You know, I did not vote for Trump, and I did not want him reelected. But once in a blue moon, he did do something. And I'm like, oh, did not expect that. Did not see that coming. Good on you. I mean, that's just humans. And maybe it's immature for us to say this human is all good and this human is all bad, because my tiny little mind can't fathom that they could be both.
Hey, real quick, I want to say that we got Gabe, One Shepherd Gabe.
Hey, how you doing, Harwood?
He's in the lobby here. So I promised this guy I was going to let him come into our live stream, and he had a piece he wanted to say. So we're going to introduce him. I don't even know what it is. He said he had a message. I know he's big in like the local militia movements. I know we talked about that earlier tonight. So I think it's pertaining to that. I don't know, but I'm going to bring him in here and introduce. So let's see how we can get this going.
Hey,
Gabe, how you doing, man?
Hollywood.
Welcome to my flock.
before he says his piece, I want to introduce him to the audience, a little background. So Gabe, the reason he's called Hollywood, he's kind of like what is it, Professor Q on Bond. All right, he shows up to these One Shepherd training semesters with all these different gadgets. Like I'm talking like, if you ever seen the Land Warrior system, early '90s, they were coming up with like the Land Warrior system where you could, put the weapon around corners and shoot. And you had HUDs in your glasses and all kinds of stuff. OICW weapon system. This dude shows up in One Shepherd with that stuff. One time he showed up, he had these perimeter lights that he could activate with a remote, which was really cool. It worked really well. So anyways, that's this guy. He's like an inventor. Interesting individual. So anyways, Gabe, say your piece, man. What are you here to say?
Well, look, I was just listening to you guys last time. I was wondering how you were feeling about the Afghan pullout, and then sure enough, you posted like an actual live stream, and you're like, hey, it's unbelievable what's going on, and it's interesting to hear your perspective and everybody who's in Afghanistan. I right now my manager, he's actually missing his left arm because he was I think he was in airborne, and an IED went off sort of towards the end of when he was there, and it blew his arm right off. So he's got like a nub right here. And I was asking him, hey, how are you feeling about it? He's like, oh, my best friend just died for no reason. He died for no reason, this and that. I try to prop his spirits up and stuff like that. But, it's just from what I could see going into all this. I mean, I know you have what's your friend's name? Who's Bruce, who's you say he's kind of the civilian perspective, and I have to remember that I was before I left high school, I was looking into going into the Army and enlisting or something like that. But I had a teacher from he was like in his 50s or 60s, and he had students who had left, who went to Vietnam, got drafted while he was teaching high school to them, right? And so that's how long he's been around. So he always kind of approached it from like a more pacifist perspective as an anthropology teacher. But we used to watch a lot of different like war movies, Black Hawk Down, Full Metal Jacket in his class. So it was kind of cool class because we would always discuss current events. But what it was distinctively, what I thought to myself back then, after that was in 2008, 2007, I graduated in 2009. I was thinking, okay, this war is either going to be, when we first went in, I thought this is going to be in and out like Panama or like Operation, Desert Storm or Desert Shield, or this is going to go on for a long ass time like Vietnam. And by my senior year, I was thinking, man, this is going to go on for a while, I think, because it's a little bit, like the longer you stay in a conflict, your statistical probability of success kind of goes down. And they even say that if there was like an alien invasion, if we could muster out 80 years, it actually ticks in the opposite direction of who wins. The probability of winning goes up. And so it's kind of one of those things where I think war should kind of be in and out, direct, and like have clear objectives and then come out. And I thought after that, I was like, hey, you know, I don't really see a clear objective here, because you could go on patrol all year round in your own, even in America, you could patrol for crime and terrorists all year round and never see an end to that. And so when I saw that there was a lack of, you know, like a lack of tangible objectives, it kind of turned me off a little bit to that, you know. And for me, I think that, you know, as long as we have a target, we can destroy it. But if we don't have clear objectives, it puts the people on the ground in a difficult position, because, you know, when is it done? When's the mission done? And when did we succeed? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, we talked at length about this already. I mean, it's at minimum 60-year commitment.
Yeah.
You have to provide that, you know, security and stability operations until the local indigenous forces are at a point where they can manage everything on their own. Yes, obviously we still have police forces, you know, patrolling the streets every day. You know, obviously you're never going to have any, you know, zero crime. It's a continuous thing. Well, that's what the thing. When you're doing these coin operations and the SASO operations and stuff, you have to get the indigenous forces up to the level that they can take care of the stuff on their own. So, and I thought you were going to talk about militias or something.
well, that's actually what I'm leading into, is because, like, another thing you notice, whether it was Bush, Trump, Biden, Obama, the thing is, even though, I mean, Trump used to be a Democrat when he was younger, but at the end of the day, I think how that all plays out is they all have a top-down ideology of how you maintain security. And if you look at the Second Amendment, you know, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say military. It doesn't say police force. It says a regulated militia. Militia, coming from the word militium vulgarum or militium vulgaris, depending on how it's translated, means like a military but dispersed everywhere. Or in other words, a voluntary force of people who train commensurate to a military with weapons that are similar or the same as a military, but unlike a standing army, are not beholden to a government or political interest. And that's how we were able to maintain security and freedom in our country. We had it from the grassroots up. The entire body of the people maintain that security of their own state, not just state of California, a state of being. And all these other, you know, politicians that come in, they have this top-down ideology where we're gonna disperse that security from the government. We're gonna give it out to you. And the reality is, you know, freedom is never given. It is only won. You only win your freedom. No one's gonna give it to you. And the Afghans found that out the hard way when they woke up the next day and the military had checked out for the morning. And if everybody tries to advocate their personal safety and security to the military, the police, the government, you're going to have exactly what you saw on that runway. People running away, tying themselves up to airplane runway gear and trying to get off that way. I say you should have tied yourself up to an AK with a sling and defended your country. But obviously, I don't know if it's bougie or, you know, they didn't see reality for what it was. But if they wanted that security, they needed to provide it themselves. And I think that every conflict that we've gone into since the 90s has sort of adopted that ideology of dispersing that security from the top down, and it really needs to be from the ground up. And if they can't find the people to do that, then, you know, you're going to have a lot of unnecessary suffering. And, you know, I don't know if that's a cultural thing, like what Lars has been saying, but I think in general that they failed to do that, and they didn't really focus on that aspect enough. I mean, I know that in Iraq they said, you know, there's going to be 1 AK per household or whatever. I think you were mentioning, you know. But
so it's a lot deeper, man, and we've discussed this at length. You know, Afghanistan, they don't associate as one country per se. It's
as tribes.
tribes here and there and provinces and stuff like that. So yeah, they might have that loyalty to their respective province, but they don't have that national identity like we do. If a foreign entity invaded here, you know, we all have that pride that we're going to sit here and we're going to fight, right?
Yeah,
if
Taliban invaded Vegas. If Taliban invaded Vegas right now, you're going to see me going out. You know, you don't need to pay me to go fight them. I'll do it for free.
No. Red Dawn is my sexual fantasy. I mean, been so ever since I was a kid. I mean, I've been waiting for Soviet paratroopers, and I was promised it in the '80s, and it never happened.
It didn't happen.
It materialized. So, yes.
And that's the thing. Like for me, like you know, even I think that in general, Americans, you know, it's the same thing here in America. If we didn't get here because somebody gave us our freedom and said, you're free now, we won the battle for you. We actually had to fight it ourselves. And, you know, every time I talk to people here, I say, look, you need to get your militia, your group, your defensive force, your neighborhood watch, whatever you want to call it. And you need to make sure that that is paramount, because you can't, if you outsource it to somebody else, you're going to have a bad time.
Hey, I want to ask Chris and Les something. So 20 years from now, when let's say a resurgence of the Northern Alliance comes over and they take over Afghanistan, do I then get to say that, oh, we won? I mean, because that's what we happened, right? We pulled out and the people we supported, you know, lost, right? Same thing happened in Vietnam. But do I get to say the same thing in Afghanistan? Because the Taliban was only in power for a few years before 2001. So when the Taliban gets folded by a faction that we support, do we get to say, oh, we won? We kicked the Taliban's ass, right?
I'll go you one farther. When Vietnam finally gives up its communist, totalitarian dictatorship.
Yes. 100%.
Do we get to say we won after all?
I agree.
I think the answer is strategically you would have to conclude, yes, we now achieved all of our strategic objectives. Particularly if it stays a sovereign nation that is economically viable, right? So if it defeats that, then I think we get to say yes. It also gives rise to this. You were saying, why are we sending aid to Afghanistan? That is right. That's the right question. When we defeated one country after another, I keep going back to Italy.
Hey, Doc, your comms are going down.
Are they? Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's back now.
He's cutting out. You got the old Brent problem.
Traded.
So Doc's got to upgrade his computer next live stream.
Yeah. So let's take over for him.
Okay. Got it. Well, you know, can we claim victory? Absolutely. In Vietnam, we can already start to claim victory. You know, the Vietnamese trade with us a lot right now. You have American tourists going there. And on top of it, you know, the Chinese are encroaching in their territories in the South China Sea too. And they're starting to get American aid. And I guarantee you, in a hot war with China, they're going to be on our side, not the Chinese side.
I agree 100%.
One of the great quotes from Ho Chi Minh in the 1950s, when he made a deal where the French could stay for 5 years, and he was questioned by one of the other revolutionaries with him. And he said, well, I'd rather smell French shit for 5 years than Chinese shit for 1,000. Because Vietnam was occupied by China for 1,000 years. You know, there's no love lost there between the Vietnamese and the Chinese. So as the PLA starts to push, the Vietnamese are going to look for an ally, and we're going to be it. And that's going to be victory by default.
And we're already training with them. I've seen stories that U.S. Navy is docked in, you know.
Yep. We are docking back in Canron Bay, doing port visits. Put a whole carrier battle group in there last year.
It might just ignite a flame within some of these people. My hope is that at least some of these people kind of have some sort of flame of freedom in their heart that, you know, makes them want to fight or mount some sort of offensive later on. Even in Vietnam, you know, there might have been something that goes on that people strive to that's beyond what they have now.
Well, we don't have to fire a shot in Vietnam. I think just what these guys have been saying too, it's already gearing, it's leaning and going that way. Hell, even China, is not 100% communist. They've seen the benefits of some capitalist ideals, and they're trying to play both aspects of it.
One of the things that's overlooked is the Chinese are in trouble that most people overlook. They still they have an economy, and it's growing in many respects, but it's also built on that communist system. And there's a lot of people that have state jobs over there, and they've got factories producing things that not are necessarily in demand. Here in the Western world, if you run a factory and you produce a product that nobody buys, you go out of business. That's just a fact of life. Over there in China, you're producing a factory and you're producing a product no one's buying. The state will pay you to keep producing that product just so you keep that village that factory's in employed and doing that. And that's a paradigm that cannot last long. And when you have that consumer-based commodity that the Chinese have, all it's going to take, and Trump started this. Biden's won't see it through, but Trump started this. When you put heavy tariffs on Chinese imports, at some point, and we've seen it with some of our customers in my logistics business, they left China and went to Vietnam. They went to Malaysia. They went to India. And when they were there, the customer said, well, all the pain in the ass to move my manufacturing from China to Vietnam, Malaysia, and India is if the sanctions go away, I'm not moving back.
China has a weird kind of setup because on one hand, they have a super capitalist society in the sense that, like, let's say that there's a product that's made at one factory, another factory or another company will copy that product and get off scot-free. They don't really enforce the patent law, and they'll go back and copy each other's designs, continually improving it. And then there's constantly this competition. You'll see it play out on eBay or on Amazon, two competing products that are they look almost clones of each other, but one is a little better, or they have the V2 version, the V3 version, and so in one way they have like a hyper capitalist society, but on the other hand they have fascism, which is the government directing private sector and the private life of the citizens. Yeah,
and it's probably safe to say the Chinese are more fascist than communist at this stage.
Right. And fascism is, keep in mind, in the media today, they keep saying fascism is a right-wing ideology. Fascism is, they were part of three movements: socialism, communism, and fascism. The communists wanted to own the means of production. The fascists said, well, we still want private ownership, but we want to direct the means of production. So they all involve top-down government control of the private sector. It's just, I would say maybe fascism is slightly right of Leninism, but that doesn't make it right-wing. So you're seeing that right now, but it's still, America itself has moved towards that more and more with the regulation of every industry, every product. I mean, even for the stuff I build, I have to worry about ITAR. There's a $1,200 pay-in just to register your company and start selling that, I guess. Well, and they decide if your product qualifies or not as ITAR.
Well, there's plenty of that stuff over in Afghanistan right now that the Taliban's gonna be selling wholesale. So.
Oh yeah, let's go down. You want to go get it? You want to go down there and get some MRAPs?
We could
ship it back.
Yeah.
But the other bit I wanted to talk to you guys about is the economic thing. I think I mentioned that when I was chatting with you earlier today. The economic issues that America's going through right now, in relation to the ramp up with trying to deal with the Pacific and the Chinese, really kind of concerns me, especially with how Afghanistan's concluding right now. You have to remember, and probably Larsen might be able to elaborate on this part, but after World War I and after the Weimar Republic for Germany, we saw them, try to gain their foothold back, during World War II, and they lost. The Germans people lost that war, but the thing is, it wasn't necessarily because they had the worst products or the worst, weaponry. they had some of the most technological advanced weaponry that we saw in that decade or that 20-year period of 20 years, but they still lost. And my concern going into this next thing, if China, is I think personally that we have to deal with what's going on at home before we even attempt that, because what Xi Jinping or whatever just stated, if you try to cross China, you're gonna have a 3 billion man wall of steel, or a wall of steel built by 3 billion people.
Chris, once you jump in there, man.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I got to stop you, Hollywood. You'll never stop. But
No, that's all right. I mean, he raises several good points, and that is that, look, just because we can see the economy of China right now waffling, they have the haves and the have-nots, and there's this totalitarian top-down control, and it's the wild, wild west of patents and, you know, and copyrights. Yeah, well, we saw a lot of that in the Weimar Republic as well, and we saw that from the ashes of that, there were people who were smart enough to play the game correctly, and you see them pull themselves up by the bootstraps, right? This is the point, is that there's a transformation of Germany in the 30s. While the rest of the world is suffering this horrific depression, Germany's putting everybody to work. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I hear what you're saying. I'm going, okay, we're producing the better product. We're the industrial might. We are doing all of this stuff, but we also tie our hands. We tie our hands with all sorts of regulation and all these things that China isn't. And if China, if that is actually going to inspire innovation and productivity, then they very well may win that in the long run. So that's certainly one consideration I would agree with. Well,
and the thing is, we went into World War II as the powerhouse, like the economic powerhouse. We were at our peak for production output. We turned car factories into tank factories. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, could China turn their plastic shit production factory for Amazon? Could they turn it into body armor production factories and weaponry? You know what I'm saying? Like they could turn their whole.
They're already out producing it. They're building more ships right now, warships.
Exactly.
We did during the entirety of World War II. They're cranking them out. I mean, they're outpacing us by far. They have. I think it's a 60-year plan. I can't remember what it was, and they're ahead of schedule. So.
Yep, they are outproducing us in all types of military equipment. And the danger of that is there's a certain point where quantity has more quality than just qualitative in and of itself. You know, in the Second World War, the German weapons were of high quality. You know, it's not the late war that you start to see them being last ditch kind of stuff. You know, they had a very high quality. They were always constantly improving it. And what we do as Americans, we just flooded the battlefield with M4 Shermans. We had so many Shermans at one point that when the U.S. Army crossed over into Germany, if your tank threw a track, you just went back and got another tank. There was a whole maintenance thing behind that would go out, recover the tank, repair it, and that would be the next tank when somebody lost their Sherman and came back and needed a new one. You know, and so the Sherman didn't have to be as good as the Tiger because there were just so damn many of them.
Yeah.
And that's why we can't really, get cocky about it, because with China, if they wanted to slave labor camp their way to building the same amount of ships or replacing all the ships that they lose in battle to our, we could decimate everything. But I mean, I think it was the Millennium Challenge of 2000 or, where they did the Gulf War exercise, the war game. And, they had the red team Van Viper as the Op4 team. And, he defeated an entire, military flotilla of aircraft carriers and destroyers using horseback rider messages, not using the radio, and then just sending a shit ton of, of pontoon boats with torpedoes on the front of them into the carrier group. And yeah, they lost 400 out of 500 pontoon pontoon boats, but the 100 that got through sunk everything.
You know what he's talking about, Brent, don't you? Do you know what he's referring to? The war game where the Marine general came in, or Marine colonel, I think, at the time. But
whatever. General Van Ripper.
Yeah, and he came in and they stopped the war game because the Op 4 was winning. And it was this Marine general who wasn't playing by the rule books. And they're like, no, you're not playing fair.
You're not using the radio. You need to use the radio so we can jam it. And he's like, I'm not using the radio. I'm going to send a horseback messenger to relay your positions.
And so this is one of the things, like, look, we've always sought technological advantage. That's our lesson from World War II. And we could argue even before that. We've sought, as Americans, technological advantage. And yet the Vietnamese did not enjoy that. Neither did the Taliban. And we can give examples of that as well. Adid in Somalia, General Adid avoided our detection by using runners. So there you go. And so my point here is a technological advantage is known to always be temporary. The enemy will mitigate it, reverse engineer it, or build something better. And I don't want to say, oh, we don't need to look at technology. That would be just asinine. Who wants to? No, I couldn't abide by that. My concern, and this is at 2 hours. I noticed we just hit the 2 hour mark into this. Maybe we want to save this for another conversation. But my concern there, and I appreciate you bringing it up, Hollywood, was that I'm sorry, Sabatini. Anyway, is that because it's always temporary, and we are putting our emphasis, America is doing that. Look, the United States Army just did, a handful of years ago, they did the squad foundations of the decisive force. And they said, look, our aircraft dominate, not just they're superior, but dominate the enemy. Our tanks dominate the enemy. Our artillery dominate. Our information systems and our C2 systems and, targeting ISR systems, they dominate the enemy. Why aren't our infantry squads dominating the enemy? And so they decided, well, we could do human factors, that is how humans think and behave, physiologically and mentally and emotionally. We can deal with human factors. We can deal with squad organization, like unit organization and how we deploy, or we can pursue technology. And the United States Army once again said, yeah, we don't want to talk about task organization. We've been talking about this since 1939. We're done with it. And human factors, we don't understand it. Doesn't give us a warm fuzzy. Let's go after the cool toys. And that was the Army's decision. I think the Marine Corps with Marine University has more or less adopted most of that. But with the Marine Corps University, they've started to say, how do humans think? And you're starting to see them really embrace wargaming. Everything from tabletop to virtual to live action wargaming. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, this is too big of a topic now to jump in at the nth hour, but it's a fascinating topic.
I think my point would be is that, to sum that all up, is that, again, what he ended up resigning his post or his position during that war game because he said, no, I'm not going to, because they wanted to refloat those ships, and the Pentagon wanted to prove that they could win using, the methods they think the enemy were going to use. But he ended up saying, no, I'm not going to play your game because people could die from this, just so that we fuel your fantasy here. And the reality is that, again, we saw, when you think of the aircraft carrier and all these things, it's, again, a top-down system of approach because they want to centralize command dominating the battlefield. But the reality is you need decentralized, distributed warfare. And that's why I embrace the militia, because it's distributed to the point of every single person in the whole entire body of the people, the public, the whole nation. If in my opinion, if going into these wars, we have to keep that in mind that, hey, you got a Pentagon, or you've got a government that wants to maintain that top-down control over the battlefield. And the reality is it might take a dynamic, decentralized, distributed force of almost free thinking, so to speak, units being able to combat something like China that might just try to swarm warfare your carrier group or something like that. In other words, you might need to actually give up some of that power and decentralize it to the individual soldiers in order to win. Something like using missiles rather than big giant ships.
So let's juxtapose what happened there in 2000 in an American war game with what happened in China in 2012. And I forget the gentleman's name, but he is a Chinese general who was tasked to stand up a national training center, much like Fort Irwin, California, that the U.S. Army uses at NTC. And so he stood up that. But he not only stood it up, he studied. They very carefully studied what they call Blue 4 tactics. So he studied Army and Marine tactics and how they work with air assets and everything else. Wasn't a naval fight. And he started winning. It was initially a battalion, so they would fight a battalion. Then it was battalion on 2 battalions. Then it was battalion on 3 battalions. And something like after his 6th victory in 2 years, he was an outcast and he was admonished, and it was going to shut the whole system down. And they were going to call him a failure because he was defeating the Chinese military. Until, you know, good for the Chinese, somebody high enough up said, you're going to keep fighting him, and he's going to play by U.S. rules until you learn to defeat him. So, you know, it's that same thing. It's top down, but top down can sometimes be good. Top down isn't inherently bad. It's what's the message. And when the message is no, 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 we want to win. You can't let guerrillas and terrorists and insurgencies and crime cartels and, you know, militias beat the United States Navy. It's not fair. And yet they did in this simulation. Now, admittedly, it's a simulation, but nonetheless they did. And the brass was upset about it. And you're right. They admonished this Marine general and said, you're not allowed to play like that. That's breaking our rules. And what they meant was it's making us look bad. China seems to have embraced this and said, no.
And that's the thing. Like I mentioned before, you know, anytime you deny reality, you're asking for unnecessary suffering. It could be anything. It could be when you step off, when you're walking down the stairs and it's too dark to see the last step and you think you're touching ground and you're actually touching air and you fall on your face. Anytime you believe a reality, something that's not true, you're going to have unnecessary suffering. And right now, I think that you need to put the ego aside. You have to have an open enough mind to be able to actually see the truth for what it is, not for what you want it to be. Because if you don't, you're going to live a lie, and then you're going to have reality smack you in the face with what's really the truth. And you don't want that to happen while you're in the war. I think Brent mentioned, how the waste, how people burying their ammo in the dirt, that's stuff that ends up losing you wars and stuff like that. And I would say that that's exactly right. Anytime you try to control your way with your ego through a situation rather than embrace reality or as Brent might say, embrace the suck, you're going to actually, cause more harm to yourself that you don't need to actually go through. And people need to be able to, see reality for what it is and adapt their tactics for that situation right away and say, this isn't working. We need to do something else. Because if you keep trying to charge up the middle and you're going to get cut down by the machine gun nest, whatever. Whereas if you actually were open-minded and threw away your ego for a second and said, okay, that plan sucked. Let's take the flank on the right. People have to admit when they're wrong for them to find the solution and be right.
We're going to get before I say this, we should probably start thinking of a stopping point because we are at 2 hours plus here. But we're going to get a very rude awakening very shortly in the next war against the pure threat. The American people have been conditioned to these very low casualty numbers. And I don't mean to minimize our losses in Iraq and Afghanistan. Obviously, losing thousands of guys is a tragedy. But the reality is we lost, in some cases, as many guys in Iraq and or Afghanistan as we did in one battle in World War II, right? Yeah. And look at Desert Storm, for instance, very low casualty producing war for us. We're going to go against the pure threat, and we're going to be back to those original World War II numbers. And the American people have got to be ready for this. and it's not going to be pretty. So it's going to be a real punch to the face, and I don't think this public in its current form are ready for that.
No, you are absolutely right, Brent. And I will say, I always look at Desert Storm as my war. It's the war I fought. And one of the horrible outcomes from it was war by Nintendo. Everybody liked watching all the videos back here at home. Not a lot of people got hurt. Matter of fact, other than by accident, Saddam's army did not manage to kill an American soldier with a bullet. He was that inept. And we like those low casualty numbers. And when you extrapolate the numbers from Afghanistan over 20 years, that's day one of Iwo Jima.
Yep.
The American public is not going to be ready for casualties. And no disrespect intended here, we just proved it last week. 13 guys went down. Wish they were still with us. But even during Vietnam, where casualty tolerance started to go up, 13, that wasn't a news story at the time.
And think about how that, Biden, I think Biden truly believed that the Afghan army was going to fight for them. And, that's why he pulled the army out before he, pulled the soft targets out. But when you, once you think about it again, he believes something that's not true. And now he's going to have unnecessary suffering that didn't have to occur because of that. So, and to your point, the American economy is not even ready for that kind of conflict, in my opinion, either. If we had, we can't, back then, I think it was Peter Schiff that was talking about this. When we had World War II kickoff, we didn't have stimulus checks for businesses when all their customers went off to fight the war. They had to dip into their own savings for those 4 years to withhold and withstand all that lack of customer base that was off now fighting the war in World War II. If we had to fight a war now, right now, all these businesses are leveraged out on credit. They don't have the savings anymore that they used to have back in the 40s and 30s that they should have if they wanted to weather the storm for that kind of conflict.
Sorry, I highlighted this comment just so I could read it.
That looks like a topic for another live stream, Brent.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, I'm trying to follow some of the text over here, and it seems to be dominated by religious infighting right now. I'm what?
They're like fighting the Crusades or something over here.
They are. I mean, I think last time we had people fighting over which, house pet was best. And, the poor little old cat ladies didn't win out. But,
we got Alpha Charlie Concepts on here.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. All right.
Let's wrap this up. Let's go around the horn. What's a nice little closing statement here?
Well, Doc, I saw in the live chat column there are a lot of people asking some One Shepherd questions.
Yes.
So why don't you answer some of those, which was about foreign nationals attending and whether it's like as an equivalent of NCO school.
Okay, so if this will mean something to the military personnel, and all of the civilians will go, have no idea what that man just said. But yeah, for the military veterans who are asking and in active duty, hey, is One Shepherd an NCO school? It very much is. It's remarkably similar to an NCO officer basic course. It throws in elements of School of the Infantry, heavy doses of that. And it's got just enough of a ranger, some people say pre-ranger patrolling in it, but it is a 6 semester, and each semester's 7 days. So if you do your math, it's 42 days of field training. Most people stretch that over 2 semesters a year, 3 years to complete the program. But that's what it is. And do we accept foreigners? We right now are at our 40th anniversary, are claiming 600 alumni from 24 nations worldwide. Now, to to be a little more specific, and I don't have the list with me, there's something like 34 nations in the world that the United States has agreements with, that those people can come right to America, come over to One Shepherd, and no problems. Yes, you guys can join. So there's like 34 nations. The rest of them, some of them are actually barred, if we're going to be honest. If you're from North Korea, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. But other than the few that are barred, what everybody else simply would need to do is come in and actually get a state hunting license. So if you're attending Missouri or West, Virginia, or when we finally open up in Utah and Arizona, whatever it is, you simply just come in a weekend early, get a state hunting license, which is usually like an 8-hour course, 12-hour course. And once you get that card, dude, you can handle firearms. So that's a long, drawn-out answer to simply say this. Yeah, you bet. We have 24. We have warriors from 24 nations around the world and 600 alumni. So yes. And Canadians, by the way, I saw someone saying, I'm a Canadian. Can I come? Canadians turn out to be not on the list of 34 because America has this really low key, they're Canadian. I think the American government just views Canadians as auxiliary Americans. So you guys get in with a free pass.
A Canadian is an unarmed American with health care.
Yeah, but they can get Chinese imported weapons. We can't.
And that's a good thing. How?
Well, I would definitely like some of those Norinco AKs back.
Canadian, I think Canadian did some wargaming with us, and they won with their infantry units. That is.
That's because the Canadian infantry is a ballsy ass force. They are some good guys, and they train hard. They have shit for equipment, and they're underfunded beyond belief, but they do train.
They're a great platoon.
They got the Pine Tree Vietnam going on over there.
All right, that was me.
Les, what you got, man?
All right. Well, right now up on my channel, I'm putting up a bunch of videos right now from the Luau 2-gun of 2021. That was actually put on by one of our One Shepherd new instructors coming on board. And it was 2 days of rifle and pistol and shotgun and pistol. Very challenging competition. And when it comes around in 2022, I encourage everybody to participate. Bring your A game. It's not easy. Other things we got going on. We did a week ago, we did a video on British advanced snap shooting from World War II. And we're going to be doing some more coverage of that by doing work with nods and low light and hopefully some force on force using the Miles system.
Okay.
And go ahead, Chris.
No, I thought you were done. Go for it.
And also, I'm going to be putting up some videos with some gear reviews of some recent gear systems I've acquired and had a chance to evaluate.
Cool. Very good. No, I just want to point out, I think his name was Burnsides. It was right down there. He said, hey, the Canadians came in 1812 and took part in the burning down of Washington, D.C., and my response to that is, that's why we love Canadians. Why haven't you been back since 1812, buddy?
All right. Hey, Gabe, since most people probably don't know, what your social media footprint is, why don't you tell them about your website and any other social media that you have?
Yeah, so you could check out some of my videos and reviews on miltechmoto.com. I do have a website as well. I just have kind of had to put some of that stuff on the back burner because I'm always working now. But if as far as the stuff on sale, as far as last messages go, I'd say everybody make sure you you stay strong out there. A lot of things are going on these days, but just make sure you always maintain your own moral integrity, know right from wrong, and choose right doings over wrong doings every step of the way. Always be prepared, especially in the times that we see coming up, for the future right now. It's a little bit on shaky grounds. Try to make sure that you have all your bases covered, both, as far as networking and your own supplies, your own security, maybe buy some gold and silver to hedge against this inflation that might show up. But yeah, and if you guys want to, I'm pretty sure that the footage we're going to get for this next One Shepherd is going to be pretty good. So I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward for some awesome gun cam footage and night vision footage. And I don't know, maybe some drone footage of those chopper landings. We'll reenact. What's that one movie? The freaking, that one comedy with the Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
the freaking Huey landing. So yeah, that's all.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna close out my piece by just saying I posted up another video pretty recently. I think it was on Friday, over some night vision optics that I reviewed. So if you haven't seen that, be sure to check it out. YouTube's been fucking me pretty hard lately. I've got 400,000 subscribers, and yet I can't get more than like 5,000-6,000 views on most of these videos that I post. So I don't know what the deal is. The numbers don't add up, but regardless, make sure you guys check that out. Smash a like on that. I'd appreciate that. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I will be going to this 40th anniversary One Shepherd semester, and I look forward to it greatly. It's going to be outstanding, and we're going to have helicopter insertion, for crying out loud. So it's going to be epic proportions.
Definitely.
That's pretty much it, guys. Anybody else have any parting words?
No.
All right, fellas. I noticed that for at least the last hour, we've kept between 170 to 180 viewers in here at all times. That's pretty impressive in my eyes. So I appreciate all you guys tuning in, all you guys waging the crusades over here in the comment section. Joining us and keeping the debates going on and everything else, even though that a lot of them have nothing to do with what we're talking about. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good night.
Take it easy, everybody.